At 70, he started running. People laughed, said he was too old, but 1 year later, he proved every single one of them wrong. The sun was barely rising over the quiet little town of Maple Grove when Arthur Green, 70 years old, bent down to tie the laces of his old running shoes. They were worn out, cracked at the sides, frayed at the edges, kind of like him, but they still worked, and so did he. As Arthur stood at the park gate, a few early joggers glanced his way. Some smiled politely. Others whispered to each other. A teenager passing by even chuckled. "Hey Grandpa, you lose your way to the bingo club." Arthur smiled back. "No, kid. I just found my way to the starting line." That line, invisible to everyone else, was everything to him, because 6 months earlier, Arthur had sat in a doctor's office, hearing the words no one ever wants to hear. "Your heart isn't strong enough anymore. You need to slow down." But something inside him rebelled. He'd been slowing down for years, retiring early, watching TV all day, avoiding stairs, living carefully, and what did that bring him? A weak body and an empty spirit. That night, he looked at an old photo on the wall, him in his 30s, running down the beach with his daughter on his shoulders. He smiled softly and whispered, "Maybe I'm not done running yet." The next morning, he began. 1 block. That's all he could manage before gasping for air. People stared. Cars honked. A few laughed. An elderly neighbor shook her head. "Arthur, you'll break a hip before breakfast." But he waved and kept moving, heart pounding, lungs burning, and for the first time in years, his spirit felt alive again. Every single day, he pushed himself a little farther, 2 blocks. Then 5. Then half a mile. He kept a small notebook beside his bed, marking his progress each night. 1 step better, he'd write before turning off the light. Winter came. The roads turned icy. The cold bit into his skin. Arthur ran anyway. He slipped once, bruised his elbow, and laughed through the pain. "Guess I'm tougher than I thought," he muttered, dusting off the snow. At the local cafe, people started noticing. "Isn't that old man still running every morning?" "Yeah. Guess he doesn't know he's 70. But Arthur didn't care what they said, because every run was rebuilding him, not just his body, but his belief. By spring, something incredible had changed. He'd built more than muscle, he'd built momentum. Arthur joined a local running club. At first, the younger runners were skeptical, but soon, they were inspired. Whenever Arthur showed up, everyone seemed to run a little harder. He was living proof that it's never too late to start again. One afternoon, a trainer named Jake asked him, "Arthur, why do you keep doing this? What are you chasing?" Arthur smiled and said, "Not chasing. Remembering. I'm remembering what it feels like to be alive." A year later, his hair was whiter. His knees ached a little more, but that same heart, the one the doctors called weak, now beat stronger than ever. And on a bright Sunday morning, Arthur stood at the starting line of the Maple Grove Marathon. Thousands of runners stretched around him, young, strong, confident. A woman nearby whispered, "Is he really 70? Someone else said, "He won't last 5 miles." Arthur just smiled. He wasn't there to win, he was there to finish. The gun fired. The crowd surged forward. Arthur ran. Not fast. Not smooth, but steady. Every step carried the story of pain, laughter, loss, and stubborn hope. The miles blurred together. 1, 5, 10. By mile 20, his legs trembled. His chest burned. He almost stopped, until he heard a voice in the crowd. "Come on, Dad. You got this." Arthur looked up. His daughter was there, tears in her eyes, cheering louder than anyone else. And just like that, time disappeared. Hours later, Arthur crossed the finish line. Not first. Not last. But finished. He raised his hands in the air, tears and sweat shining on his wrinkled face. When a reporter asked, "What kept you going?" Arthur grinned and said, "Everyone told me to act my age, so I did. I acted like I had 70 years of experience, and not one reason to quit." The crowd erupted. Moral: age is just a number. Strength lives in your will, not your years. If you ever feel too old, too late, or too tired to start, Remember, Arthur, start anyway. Because the only time it's truly over is when you stop trying. Subscribe for more real stories that keep your spirit running.